out of the bunker, forced to face the fury. These the PM's darkest days. Trying to navigate a route through the crisis, heading to Parliament to face angry MPs. Hopes Boris Johnson might have had on calling time on the party's scandal now long gone. There's no escaping it. He's facing the biggest test of his premiership yet. And a packed chamber marks the gravity of that moment.
Mr. Speaker, I want to apologise. I know that millions of people across this country have made extraordinary sacrifices over the last 18 months, and I know the rage they feel with me and with the government I lead when they think that in Downing Street itself the rules are not being properly followed.
An apology of sorts, but look at the opposition frontbench. The Labour leader incredulous. Keir Starmer saying, oh my God. The PM sorry that the garden gathering upset people, but still saying it didn't break lockdown rules.
When I went into that garden just after 6 on the 20th of May 2020 to thank groups of staff before going back into my office 25 minutes later to continue working, I believed implicitly that this was a work event. With hindsight, I should have sent everyone back inside. I should have found some other way to thank them. And I should have recognised that even if it could be said technically to fall within the guidance, there would be millions and millions of people who simply would not see it that way.
An explanation provoking fury, the Labour leader going in for the kill.
After months of deceit and deception, the pathetic spectacle of a man who's run out of road. His defence that he didn't realise he was at a party. It is so ridiculous. He's finally been forced to admit what everyone knew, that when the whole country was locked down, he was hosting boozy parties in Downing Street. Yes. Is he now going to do the decent thing and resign?
Words that pain him as his allies look on, worried, pensive, on the edge of their seats.
I regret the way the event I have described was handled. I bitterly regret it and wish that we could have done things differently. And I have and will continue to apologise for what we did. But, Mr. Speaker, he must wait for the inquiry, which will report as soon as possible.
This just isn't working, Prime Minister. No. Everyone could see what happened. Exactly. It started with reports of boozy parties in Downing Street during lockdown. The Prime Minister pretended that he had been assured there were no parties. Yeah. Then the video landed. So then he pretended he was sickened and furious about the parties. Now it turns out he was at the parties all along. Can't the Prime Minister see why the British public think he's lying through his teeth?
The calls for his resignation relentless.
This weak and contentious Prime Minister can no longer limp on. The message from the public is clear. Remove this unfit Prime Minister from office and do it now.
Will the Prime Minister, for the good of the country, accept that the party is over and decide to resign?
We have seen standards in public life trashed. So for once, can the Prime Minister do the honourable thing and resign?
A moment of reckoning made worse as his own side starts to turn on him too.
He said with hindsight he would have done things differently, which for me is an acceptance from the Prime Minister that it was wrong, and therefore I don't want to be in this position, but I am in the position now where I don't think he can continue as leader of the Conservatives.
But the row over number 10 parties is about far more than just politics. It's about people's lives, their sacrifices and their personal loss. One of these stories touched on by the Labour leader today.
Hannah Brady's father, Sean, was just 55 when he lost his life to COVID. He was a fit and healthy key worker. She realises that the Prime Minister had partied in that same garden the very day her dad's death certificate was signed.
I sympathise deeply with Hannah.
But the PM's sympathy and apology nowhere near enough for Hannah, who watched her father Sean pass away in ICU just 4 days before the May 20th Downing Street gathering.
When I met Boris on the 28th of September 21 in the Downing Street garden, the same garden that party happened in, I told him exactly what had happened to my dad, and I showed him a photo of Dad on a ventilator. He attempted to assure me that he'd done everything he could to protect my dad, that he'd followed the science and that he'd followed the rules. It seems almost cruel now that he hosted 5 members of bereaved families, listened to their stories of how loved ones died from COVID in exactly the same garden where on the 20th of May, he'd invited over 100 people to a party.
Have you been convinced by his apology then today?
Not at all, no. He reminds me of one of my pupils, so I'm a trainee teacher, that's been caught doing something that they shouldn't.
The Prime Minister today said sorry, but not for the actual bring your own booze garden gathering in number 10, rather for the impression it left in the minds of voters who at the time were observing lockdown rules. A qualified apology then that left Hannah and many of his own MPs deeply unconvinced. But it did at least buy him some time as we await now the outcome of that independent investigation about what went on in number 10. But even if he does survive that, allies admit it's going to get very, very messy. But beyond all the drama in this place is now a bigger question. Is this a PM who has the moral and political authority to lead this country once the parties are put to bed? Beth Rigby, Sky News, Westminster.